He began as England's golden prince, young, brilliant, and adored. But his desperate need for a son drove him to defy the Pope and break England from Rome. Six marriages, broken loyalties, and blood on the scaffold would change England forever. On June 24, 1509, bells rolled across London as a new king entered Westminster Abbey. Henry VIII was 17, athletic, educated, and almost impossibly young. Beside him walked Catherine of Aragon, the Spanish princess once married to his brother. They were crowned together beneath cloth of gold. To many, Henry promised a brighter age. He loved music, hunting, tennis, theology, and magnificent display. After the guarded final years of his father's reign, England saw energy and hope. No one in the abbey could yet see the later king, the immense figure surrounded by executions, ruined marriages, and a church divided from Rome. That king had begun as a second son. Henry was born at Greenwich on June 28, 1491, the child of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. The Tudor dynasty was only 6 years old. Henry VII had taken the crown at Bosworth and married Elizabeth, joining the rival houses of Lancaster and York. Their first son, Arthur Tudor, carried the dynasty's hopes. His name recalled Britain's legendary King Arthur. The younger Henry was not expected to rule. Arthur was trained as the future king, while Henry spent more of his childhood near his mother and sisters. It is often said that Henry was intended for the church. That is possible, but surviving evidence does not prove such a career was firmly decided. His education was exceptional. Tutors taught him languages, scripture, history, philosophy, music, and courtly conduct. Religion was not merely ceremonial. Long before his conflict with the papacy, Henry took theology seriously and considered himself a faithful Catholic prince. In November 1501, 15-year-old Arthur married Catherine of Aragon, daughter of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. The marriage connected the vulnerable Tudors to a powerful European royal house. Arthur and Catherine were sent to Ludlow, where Arthur was expected to learn government. 5 months later, Arthur was dead. He died on April 2, 1502, after a sudden illness. The disease is unknown. Sweating sickness has often been suggested, but cannot be established. Catherine survived and insisted for the rest of her life that their marriage had never been consummated. Others later claimed the opposite. No surviving evidence resolves the question beyond doubt. The uncertainty would one day help tear England from Rome. For now, it left Catherine a teenage widow and made 10-year-old Henry heir to the throne. In February 1503, Elizabeth of York died after giving birth. Henry had lost his brother and then his mother within a year. His father, fearful that the dynasty depended upon one surviving son, kept the new heir closely protected. Henry learned royal ceremony but gained little experience of government. Catherine remained in England while diplomats argued over her future. She and Henry were betrothed in 1503, and a papal dispensation was obtained because she had been his brother's wife. Yet the marriage was delayed as Henry VII used it in his diplomacy. Then, on April 21, 1509, Henry VII died at Richmond Palace. The protected prince became king almost overnight. Within weeks, Henry VIII married Catherine. Their coronation presented them as young, devout, and united, a new beginning after years of uncertainty. But beneath the gold, music, and summer celebrations lay the fear that haunted every Tudor ruler. A dynasty born in war could survive only through an heir. Part 2, The Golden Prince. In the first years of his reign, Henry VIII seemed determined to fill England with light. His court glittered with music, dancing, tournaments, disguises, and costly ceremony. Tall, athletic, and highly educated, Henry played instruments, debated theology, hunted, and competed before cheering crowds. He presented himself as a Renaissance prince and a warrior king, not the cautious ruler his father had been. Catherine of Aragon shared the center of this brilliant court. Their marriage appears to have begun with genuine affection. Henry trusted her judgment, while Catherine brought education, diplomatic experience, and royal confidence. Yet behind every celebration stood the question of succession. Catherine's first pregnancy ended in loss. Then, on New Year's Day 1511, she gave birth to a living son at Richmond Palace. The child was named Henry. Bells rang, bonfires burned, and guns fired for the prince who seemed to have secured the Tudor future. 52 days later he was dead. The cause was never established. Infant death was common in Tudor England, but royal grief was no less real for being familiar. The little prince was buried in Westminster Abbey, and the nursery that had promised stability fell silent. Henry turned toward another measure of kingship: war. English monarchs had claimed the French crown for generations, and the memory of Agincourt still haunted royal ambition. An expedition sent against France in 1512 failed amid disease, poor supplies, and conflicting Spanish objectives. Henry refused to abandon his dream. In 1513 he crossed the Channel in person. His army besieged Therouanne and defeated a French force in the so-called Battle of the Spurs. Mocking reference to the speed of the French retreat, Tournai also surrendered. The victories were real, but their lasting strategic value was limited. Their symbolic value to Henry was enormous. He had worn armor on foreign soil and returned as the warrior king he imagined himself to be. While Henry pursued glory in France, Catherine governed England as regent. King James IV of Scotland invaded in support of France. On September 9, 1513, an English army led by Thomas Howard, Earl of Surrey, met the Scots at Flodden. James and many Scottish nobles were killed in one of the bloodiest battles ever fought between the two kingdoms. Catherine did not personally command at Flodden, as later romantic accounts sometimes suggest. But she directed the realm during the crisis, helped organize its defense, and moved north with supplies. After the victory, she sent Henry a piece of the dead Scottish king's coat. For a moment, husband and wife stood at the summit of prestige. Henry victorious in France, Catherine triumphant as regent at home. But war consumed money without creating lasting power. Peace followed, and the conquests brought little permanent advantage. Meanwhile, Catherine endured further unsuccessful pregnancies. On February 18, 1516, she delivered a healthy child at Greenwich. It was a daughter, Mary. Mary was cherished and carefully educated. Henry publicly hoped that a son would follow, because a daughter was not believed to offer the same protection against disputed succession and civil war. The young king still appeared golden. His marriage remained intact, his throne secure, and his court magnificent. Yet inside the royal nursery, hope was becoming fear. And the desire for a son was beginning to harden into necessity. Part 3: The Cardinal and the Secret Son. Behind the splendor of Henry's court stood a man who could transform royal desire into policy. Thomas Wolsey, the son of an Ipswich tradesman, rose through the church by intelligence, energy, and skill. Henry made him Archbishop of York, a cardinal, Lord Chancellor, and papal legate. Some foreign ambassadors called Wolsey the other king. He directed diplomacy, finance, justice, and government. Yet Henry was never his puppet. Wolsey remained powerful because he understood what his master wanted. In 1518, the cardinal helped negotiate the Treaty of London, an ambitious peace agreement across Europe. 2 years later, diplomacy became spectacle. Near Calais, Henry met Francis I of France at the Field of Cloth of Gold. Golden tents, wine fountains, and tournaments entertained two rival courts. The summit created little lasting change. Its message was symbolic. Henry wanted to stand beside Francis as an equal. Around the same time, he met Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor and Catherine's nephew. England's influence depended on balancing one powerful monarch against the other. But beneath the golden cloth, the Tudor succession remained dangerously fragile. After another unsuccessful pregnancy in 1518, no further pregnancies of Catherine are securely recorded. Mary remained Henry's only legitimate child. Then, in June 1519, another woman gave birth to a son. She was Elizabeth Blount, one of Catherine's attendants and Henry's mistress. The exact date is uncertain. But Henry acknowledged the child and named him Henry Fitzroy, son of the king. The birth showed that Henry could father a healthy boy, although we cannot know precisely how he understood it. Catherine had carried several children, and the medical causes of their deaths remain unknown. Tudor society often explains such suffering through sin, divine judgment, or supposed female weakness. In 1521, Henry answered Martin Luther with a theological work defending the seven sacraments and papal authority. Henry participated in the project. Although the extent of his authorship remains debated and learned advisors probably assisted him. Pope Leo X rewarded Henry with the title Defender of the Faith. The irony would become immense. The king praised for defending papal authority would later remove that authority from his kingdom. For now, Henry remained a loyal Catholic prince. He allied with Charles V against France and dreamed again of conquest. When Charles captured Francis I at Pavia in 1525, Henry hoped the victory might open a path toward the French crown. Charles had little interest in granting him one. To finance Henry's ambitions, Wolsey attempted to collect a levy called the Amicable Grant. Resistance spread and the government was forced to retreat. Even the cardinal's power had limits. That same year, 6-year-old Henry Fitzroy was created Duke of Richmond and Somerset and surrounded with princely honors. There is no conclusive evidence that Henry intended to make him heir. But the elevation of an illegitimate son could hardly be ignored while Mary remained the only legitimate child. By the middle of the 1520s, Henry possessed wealth, prestige, a brilliant minister, a legitimate daughter, and an acknowledged son. What he did not possess was the one thing he believed his dynasty required: a legitimate male heir. And within Catherine's household, another woman had already appeared. Her name was Anne Boleyn. Part 4, the woman who would not be a mistress. Anne Boleyn did not enter Henry's story as a queen. She appeared as one young woman among many at court. Her birth year remains disputed. She spent important years in the Netherlands and France, learning the language, fashion, and manners of continental courts. By 1522, Anne was back in England and serving Catherine of Aragon. That March, she played Perseverance in a court masque. Henry may have noticed her there, although the beginning of his interest cannot be dated with certainty. By about 1526, Henry's attraction was unmistakable. 17 letters from Henry to Anne survive in the Vatican Library. Her replies are lost, leaving half of the conversation silent. His letters reveal desire, frustration, and a king unused to waiting. Anne refused to become another royal mistress. Her motives cannot be known completely. Conviction, concern for her reputation, ambition, and calculation may all have played a part. Whatever the reason, her refusal transformed Henry's pursuit. To possess and permanently, he would have to marry her. But Henry was already married. He and Catherine had been husband and wife for nearly 2 decades. She had been his companion, diplomat, and regent. Yet she was now in her 40s and another pregnancy had become unlikely. Mary remained their only surviving child. Henry began to ask whether the deaths of his sons were signs of divine punishment. He turned to a verse in Leviticus declaring that a man who took his brother's wife would be childless. Since Catherine had married Arthur, Henry argued that his own marriage violated God's law. Whether this was a sincere spiritual crisis or an argument designed to obtain and remains debated, the motives were not necessarily separate. Henry desired and feared for his dynasty, and lived in a world where political failure could appear to be a message from God. He did not initially seek a Protestant revolution. He wanted an annulment, a declaration that his marriage to Catherine had never been valid. Catherine rejected the case completely. She maintained that her marriage to Arthur had never been consummated and that the papal dispensation permitting her to marry Henry was lawful. A passage in Deuteronomy also appeared to command marriage to a dead brother's widow in certain circumstances. The theology was complex, but the personal danger was clear. If Catherine accepted annulment, she would lose her position as queen, and Mary's legitimacy could be threatened. Catherine would not surrender. In 1527, Henry ordered Wolsey to obtain a solution. A secret ecclesiastical hearing began examining the marriage, but Catherine learned what was happening and appealed to Rome. Then European politics closed around the king. In May 1527, imperial troops sacked Rome. Pope Clement VII sought refuge in Castel Sant'Angelo and later became a prisoner. The army served the interests of Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, ruler of Spain and Catherine's nephew. The Pope was being asked to invalidate the marriage of the emperor's aunt while living beneath the shadow of imperial power. Henry expected Wolsey to find a path through theology, law, and diplomacy. For years, the cardinal had transformed royal wishes into reality. But this wish was different. A private desire had become an international crisis, and was waiting. Catherine was resisting. The Pope was trapped. And between them stood Thomas Wolsey, knowing that failure could destroy him. Part 5. The Trial of a Queen. In the summer of 1529, the private struggle inside Henry's marriage became a public trial. Pope Clement VII sent Cardinal Lorenzo Campeggio to England to join Wolsey at a Blackfriars court deciding whether Henry's marriage was valid. On June 21, the king and queen appeared before the court. Catherine rejected its authority, believing judges chosen under Henry's influence could not treat her fairly. Contemporary accounts describe her kneeling before her husband and appealing directly to him. The wording of her speech differs between surviving reports, but its meaning is clear. Catherine reminded Henry of 20 faithful years as his wife. She insisted that she had been a virgin when she married him and asked what offense she had committed to deserve rejection. Then she rose, bowed, and walked away. When officials called her back, she refused to return. Catherine had appealed to Rome and would not recognize a court she considered illegitimate. Henry praised her character, yet insisted that his conscience could no longer accept their marriage. The hearings continued without her. Witnesses were questioned about her brief marriage to Prince Arthur decades earlier. Servants recalled distant events, but their accounts were uncertain and contradictory. Nothing proved beyond doubt whether that marriage had been consummated. Henry expected a decision. Instead, on July 23, Campeggio adjourned the court. Soon afterward, the Pope ordered the case to be heard in Rome. For Henry it felt like betrayal. For Wolsey it was disaster. For 15 years, Wolsey had served Henry's ambitions. Now he could not give the king freedom from Catherine. Anne's supporters suspected obstruction. But no convincing evidence shows that Wolsey opposed the annulment. He was trapped between a king who demanded success and a pope who would not provide it. In October 1529, Wolsey was accused under the law of praemunire for exercising papal authority in England. The charge was ironic. He had acted as papal legate for years with Henry's approval. But law at court increasingly followed the needs of the crown. Wolsey surrendered the Great Seal, lost his offices and gave up much of his property. Thomas More replaced him as Lord Chancellor. The man once called the other king withdrew from court. Wolsey's wealth and power had created many enemies. Yet his final failure came from a task that may never have been possible. He was allowed to travel north as Archbishop of York. In 1530, new accusations of treason were prepared. Wolsey was arrested at Cawood and ordered to London. Already ill, he weakened during the journey south. He reached Leicester Abbey and died there on November 29, 1530, before he could face trial. His precise cause of death is uncertain, although illness was evident during the journey. Henry had lost the servant who understood him better than any other. But he had not abandoned his objective. New advisors filled the space around the throne. Thomas Cromwell, once Wolsey's servant, understood law and parliament. Thomas Cranmer, a Cambridge scholar, encouraged arguments that could be supported by European universities and decided inside England. A different solution was taking shape. If the Pope would not release Henry from his marriage, perhaps England would remove the Pope from the decision. The king had asked Rome for justice. Soon he would declare that Rome had no right to judge him at all. Part 6. The King Above the Pope. Henry's break with Rome did not begin with armies or burning churches. It began with statutes, legal arguments, and carefully chosen words. Thomas Cromwell understood that Parliament could transform the king's private demand into the law of the realm. The Reformation Parliament, summoned in 1529, gradually transferred authority from the papacy to the crown. In 1531, the clergy were accused of violating praemunire by recognizing Wolsey as papal legate. To obtain a pardon, They paid a vast sum and conditionally acknowledged Henry as head of the English Church. That condition would not protect them for long. Henry sent Catherine away from court. She saw him for the last time in July 1531, and he refused to let Mary accompany her. Mother and daughter would never meet again. Catherine continued to call herself queen. Henry called her Princess Dowager, the title of Arthur's widow. The dispute was not merely about names. It determined whether Mary remained a legitimate princess. And supported reform-minded books and scholars, though her influence on policy remains debated. Cromwell, Cranmer, Parliament, and Henry himself built the break with Rome. In 1532, the submission of the clergy restricted the Church's ability to make laws without royal approval. Thomas More, unable to support the direction of events, resigned as Lord Chancellor. The following year brought the decisive change. The Act in Restraint of Appeals declared that England was an empire governed by one supreme head, the king. Appeals to Rome were forbidden. Catherine could no longer remove her case from an English court. Henry and Anne secretly married in January 1533. Reports of an earlier ceremony are uncertain. Anne was pregnant, making the destruction of Henry's first marriage urgently necessary. Thomas Cranmer, now Archbishop of Canterbury, convened a court at Dunstable. On May 23, he declared Henry's marriage to Catherine invalid. 5 days later, he pronounced the marriage to unlawful. Henry had therefore married and before his first marriage was formally annulled in England. From Rome's perspective, Catherine remained his lawful wife. On June 1, 1533, Anne was crowned at Westminster Abbey. She entered London through streets of pageants and banners, but not everyone welcomed her. Catherine retained popular sympathy, and many regarded Anne as the woman who had displaced a rightful queen. The new regime expected a son. On September 7, Anne gave birth at Greenwich. The child was healthy but female. She was named Elizabeth. Henry expressed confidence that sons would follow. Elizabeth received a magnificent household, while Mary was pushed aside and eventually ordered to serve her younger half-sister. In 1534, Parliament completed the legal revolution. The Act of Succession recognized the children of Henry and Anne as heirs. The Act of Supremacy declared Henry supreme head on earth of the Church of England. The Treasons Act made certain denials of royal authority punishable by death. This did not make Henry a Protestant in any simple sense. He still defended many Catholic doctrines and opposed ideas he considered radical. What he rejected was the jurisdiction of the Pope. England's churches still looked familiar. Mass continued. Bishops remained. But the highest authority was no longer in Rome. It sat upon the English throne. And soon, those who could not accept that fact would have to choose between conscience and survival. Part 7. The Price of Conscience. The new royal supremacy could not survive as an idea alone. Henry required obedience. In 1534, leading subjects were ordered to accept the new succession by oath. Thomas More was willing to recognize Anne's children as heirs. But he would not accept the rejection of papal authority. He tried to protect himself through silence, refusing to explain his beliefs. Silence was not enough. More was sent to the Tower of London in April 1534. John Fisher, Bishop of Rochester, also refused the oath and was imprisoned. Most people submitted. The government focused on opponents whose reputations made resistance dangerous. In May 1535, several Carthusian priors who rejected the supremacy suffered the full punishment for treason. Their deaths showed that religious vows offered no protection from the king's law. Fisher was condemned for denying Henry's title and beheaded on Tower Hill on June 22, 1535. Thomas More followed. The decisive evidence at his trial came from the official Richard Rich, who claimed More had privately denied Parliament's power to make Henry head of the Church. More called the testimony false. Its reliability remains debated, but the verdict was never seriously in doubt. On July 6, 1535, the former Lord Chancellor was beheaded. More was not a simple champion of tolerance. While in power, he had fiercely opposed Protestant reformers and supported punishment for heresy. Yet his refusal to surrender his own conscience was genuine. The king who once discussed theology with him as a friend now required his death. Henry's government had crossed a boundary. Loyalty no longer meant merely avoiding rebellion. It could require public agreement with what the king declared to be true. Thomas Cromwell now directed religious policy. In 1535 he became vicegerent in spiritual affairs, an extraordinary office for a layman. His officials surveyed the church's wealth in the Valor Ecclesiasticus and inspected monasteries across England. Commissioners reported sexual misconduct, superstition, poor discipline and financial abuse. Some corruption existed, but these reports came from agents serving a government seeking reform, control, and revenue. Their accusations must therefore be treated cautiously. Monasteries owned land and provided work, hospitality, and charity. Their wealth attracted a crown burdened by expensive ambition. As Cromwell measured the church's property, Catherine lived in isolation at Kimbolton Castle. Separated from Mary, she refused the title of Princess Dowager and continued to sign herself as Queen. Her health declined, while requests for Mary to visit were denied. Catherine died on January 7, 1536, aged 50. Rumors of poisoning spread, especially after reports that her heart appeared darkened during examination. No reliable evidence supports murder. Many modern historians consider cancer more likely, although the diagnosis cannot be proved. She was buried at Peterborough Abbey with the honors of a princess dowager, not a queen. Catherine had lost her crown, her husband, and the right to see her daughter. But she had never accepted Henry's version of their marriage. Her death removed a major obstacle to the new order. It also left Anne Boleyn alone. For years, Anne's future had depended upon replacing Catherine and giving Henry a son. Now Catherine was dead, but the promised son had still not appeared. The revolution had made Anne a queen. It had not made her safe. Part 8: The Queen in the Tower. Only weeks after Catherine's death, Anne Boleyn suffered the loss that endangered her own future. In January 1536 she miscarried. Contemporary reports describe the child as male, but the surviving evidence is limited. At court, the important fact was that Anne had again failed to give Henry a son. Henry's attention was turning toward Jane Seymour, one of Anne's attendants. By spring, Anne's position was collapsing. Her marriage had created enemies, and her relationship with Thomas Cromwell had become strained. Historians debate whether Henry ordered Cromwell to remove her or whether the minister first built the case and gained royal approval. In April, Cromwell began investigating adultery and treason. The musician Mark Smeaton was arrested and confessed to relations with the Queen. Whether he was tortured is uncertain, but the interrogation took place under pressure. Henry Norris, Francis Weston, William Brereton, and Anne's brother George Boleyn were also accused. Anne was charged with adultery, incest, and imagining the king's death. Some alleged encounters were dated to times when she appears to have been elsewhere or recovering from childbirth. No physical evidence proved the accusations, and most modern historians regard the case as fabricated or profoundly unreliable. On May 2, 1536, Anne was arrested and taken by river to the Tower of London. She entered the same royal apartments where she had prepared for her coronation 3 years earlier. The accused men were tried first and found guilty. On May 15th, Anne and George faced separate trials before panels filled with men dependent upon the king. Anne defended herself calmly, but acquittal was nearly impossible. George Boleyn and 4 others were executed on May 17th. That same day, Anne's marriage to Henry was annulled on grounds that were not clearly preserved. 2 days later, Anne walked onto a scaffold inside the tower. Her final speech followed the cautious form expected of a condemned prisoner. She did not confess to adultery or attack Henry. Her restraint may have been intended to protect Elizabeth and her surviving relatives. A French swordsman had been brought to England. His presence before the trials were complete suggests that Anne's death was already expected. On May 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn was beheaded with a single stroke. She was buried without a royal funeral in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. The woman for whom Henry had broken with Rome had been queen for only 3 years. 11 days later, Henry married Jane Seymour. Jane presented an image of quiet obedience, although whether this reflected her personality or careful courtly presentation is uncertain. Henry's expectation remained the same. He wanted a son. On October 12, 1537, at Hampton Court Palace, Jane gave birth to Prince Edward. After decades of anxiety, the Tudor dynasty finally possessed a legitimate male heir. Jane did not enjoy the triumph for long. She fell seriously ill and died on October 24, 12 days after Edward's birth. Many historians suspect childbed fever, but the exact cause is unknown. Henry's grief appears genuine. Jane received a queen's funeral and was buried in St. George's Chapel at Windsor. Henry would later choose to rest beside her. The king had obtained the son for whom he had transformed his kingdom. But victory had come through imprisonment, execution, and death. And the long-awaited heir was only a fragile infant. Part 9: Rebellion and Broken Marriages. Beyond the royal nursery, Henry's religious revolution was tearing through the landscape. The closure of smaller monasteries in 1536 helped ignite rebellion in northern England. Protesters opposed religious change, resented Cromwell's policies, and feared the destruction of traditional communities. Led by the lawyer Robert Aske, the Pilgrimage of Grace gathered tens of thousands. The rebels occupied York while declaring loyalty to Henry and demanding protection for the old faith. Henry negotiated rather than risk battle. Pardons and a future parliament were discussed, and the movement dispersed. When further unrest erupted in early 1537, the government treated it as renewed treason. Aske and other leaders were arrested and executed. The suppression cleared the way for a wider assault on monastic life. Religious houses surrendered land and treasure to the crown. Some residents received pensions, while property passed to landowners whose wealth became tied to the new order. Centuries-old buildings were stripped or abandoned. The policy enriched the crown, but also transformed local charity, employment, worship, and memory. After Jane Seymour's death, Henry had no queen and only one legitimate son. European politics made another marriage desirable. Thomas Cromwell proposed, and of Cleves, whose family offered German allies. Hans Holbein painted him. The claim that his portrait deceived Henry lacks strong evidence. Henry disliked her upon arrival, but his reasons remain uncertain. They married on January 6, 1540. Henry claimed he could not consummate the marriage, and had little power but understood the danger of resistance. The union was annulled on July 9. In return for cooperation, she received estates, income, and the honorary position of the king's sister. Cromwell was less fortunate. The failed marriage gave his enemies an opportunity. Henry had begun to distrust the minister who made him head of the church and enriched him with monastic lands. Cromwell was arrested in June 1540 and condemned by attainder without a conventional trial. On July 28, he was beheaded on Tower Hill. That same day, Henry married Catherine Howard. Catherine's exact age is uncertain. Before entering court, she had relationships with Henry Manox and Francis Derham, later admitting significant intimacy with Derham. As queen, she held secret meetings with Thomas Culpeper, a gentleman of Henry's privy chamber. Whether their relationship became fully sexual cannot be proved. The meetings, arranged with help from Jane Boleyn, were dangerous enough. In 1541, Archbishop Cranmer informed Henry of Catherine's past. The investigation uncovered Derham and Culpeper, and both men were executed. Catherine was stripped of her title and condemned through an act of attainder rather than an ordinary trial. On February 13, 1542, she and Jane Boleyn were beheaded at the Tower of London. Catherine may have been only about 20. Within 6 years, Henry had executed 2 queens and the minister who rebuilt his kingdom, and survived by yielding. Catherine died after the government turned her past into treason. Cromwell learned that years of service could not preserve a minister without royal trust. Henry still possessed his throne and his son, but he was growing older, heavier, and more isolated. The Golden Prince had become a king whom almost everyone had reason to fear. Part 10: The Last Winter. By Henry's 6th marriage, the body that once carried him through tournaments had become a prison of pain. Chronic leg ulcers, increasing weight and limited movement marked his final years. The causes cannot be diagnosed with certainty from surviving records, but the athletic prince of 1509 had disappeared. On July 12, 1543, Henry married Catherine Parr at Hampton Court Palace. Twice widowed, educated, and politically experienced, Catherine also held reformist religious beliefs. She developed close relationships with Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward, helping reconnect the royal children with their father. When Henry crossed to France in 1544, Catherine served as regent, managing councils, correspondence, supplies, and defense. Her authority recalled Catherine of Aragon's regency 3 decades earlier. Henry captured Boulogne, but the prize was costly and strategically limited. Loans, monastic wealth, and debased currency paid for war. The king still displayed magnificence, but the kingdom paid for it. In 1546, conservative councillors prepared heresy charges against Catherine and perhaps an arrest warrant. Later accounts say she calmed Henry by presenting their religious debates as a distraction from pain. Details remain uncertain, but the danger was real. Catherine survived. In 1544, Parliament restored Mary and Elizabeth to the succession after Edward, although both remained legally illegitimate. Henry's will confirm that order. The dynasty now depended upon 3 children from 3 mothers, each shaped by a broken marriage. By early 1547, Henry's health was failing rapidly at Whitehall Palace. Henry VIII died on January 28, 1547. He was 55 and had ruled for almost 38 years. His 9-year-old son became Edward VI. Henry was buried in St. George's Chapel at Windsor beside Jane Seymour, the wife who gave him his male heir. The immense monument he planned was never completed. Henry had broken Rome's authority in England, placed the monarch above the national church, dissolved monasteries and redistributed vast lands. He strengthened both crown and parliament, expanded the navy, and made England more visible in European politics. Yet his wars often achieved less than their cost suggested. He did not create a fully Protestant kingdom. Much traditional doctrine and worship survived. But the legal break he forced upon England opened a path his children would follow in different directions. Henry was neither merely the monster of popular memory nor simply a gifted prince corrupted by illness. He was intelligent, educated, charismatic, insecure, and increasingly ruthless. The pressures of succession were real, but they do not erase his choices. Those choices destroyed ministers, monks, friends, and 2 queens. They also transformed law, religion, land ownership, and the relationship between the English state and its people. The son Henry fought to obtain ruled for only 6 years. After Edward came Mary, the daughter he had declared illegitimate. Then came Elizabeth, the child of the queen he executed. The Tudor dynasty survived not as Henry expected, but through the daughters he had pushed aside. The spare prince who was never meant to be king had changed England forever. Yet for all his crowns, laws, palaces, and executions, Henry never conquered the fear that had driven him from the beginning. That when he died, everything he built might die with him.